part two, and this leads us to the interest here. Regulation may not be exactly up to this this job. People can disagree about this. We have posted kind of a light indictment of the way regulation is done in a standard fashion. And I'll talk about that some more when we talk about the interviews we did with commissioners. This is our logo. It's a manhole cover. I don't know why. This was Benz's idea. It's the idea of a good time. It's a very modern kind of manhole cover. It's covered with microchips, I guess. So the project, we had a board of experts. Our goal was to figure this out and report it back. We did that by talking to a lot of smart people. We set up an advisory committee. Rich Sedano served on it. Lena Hansen and Jim served on it as well. And we got help. This was, you do something like this, you need people who are smarter and better looking than you are, and that's what we did. So we got these people advising us, and we learned a lot from these folks. And then we interviewed CEOs and leading state regulators. I'll show you some of those names. We learned a whole lot from these people, and I'll go through some of the kind of high-level outcomes of that. From the CEOs, they want some certainty. They want to know. We had one of them tell us, tell us what you want, and we'll deliver it for you. And if society can't do that, then we'll have this kind of confusion that we've been dealing with. No incentives. If I make some efficiency gains inside the company, they take it away from me in the next rate case. Commissioners don't understand what we're doing. Sometimes we don't have a good relationship with them, so on and so on. From commissioners, we have to raise the rates. That's a tough thing to do if you've never done that work. When you face people who can't afford a rate increase and you increase their rates, despite that, it's a hard problem. They're open to modification, but up to their eyeballs in what they're doing now. So it's going to be tough to get the kind of attention on this. And with staff in place, usually getting ready to fight the last battle, not the next one, and commissioners coming and going, this can be a tough haul to try to get commissions to pay attention to this. So we had a dialogue here in Denver. We invited, again, a bunch of smart people in. We got some findings from that, much along the lines I've already suggested. We had a meeting of tribal elders. These were people who've been around this a long time. And this was more of a skull session. Some folks were old enough to attend but didn't show up. And we learned even more from this. This group really honed in on the notion that the utility has an important role. It needs to stay in the picture. It ought to be the orchestrator. So in the paper that is available now on this topic, we developed the analogy to an orchestra leader versus a music director with different sections playing in harmony. You can imagine how far you could push that analogy, so we pushed it a little ways. But the idea was really Fox Penner's smart integrator, the utility in the middle of a lot of things, making a difference, but not owning every outcome. So there's some balls and strikes for regulators to call, so it has a nice set of roles for everybody. Let me move through the rest of this quickly. More findings. We came up with kind of three models that we talk about. One is the UK's RIO model, Regulation for Incentives, Innovation and Outputs. They backed way off of telling the utilities what to do in particular ways and said to them, look, we want you to push for some certain outcomes. We want you to come up with business models and performance metrics and measurements that will tell us whether you've met those standards. And we want you to file business plans with us that show that change, show innovation for and incentives and outputs that you need to take care of these issues that we have for you. And those are being filed at Ofgem this month, so it's going to be very interesting to see how the utilities come back and what the regulator does with them. And we understand that there's a lot of differences between here and UK. This is just an example for those purposes of pointing at performance regulation. We looked into another model, an Iowa model, where rates were stable for 17 years. That is, the rates were actually the same for 17 years. And Iowa regulation proceeded by a series of legislative enactments and settlement agreements, essentially among the key parties, that seem to have some advantages, at least from the process point of view. People question whether it was just the circumstances in Iowa and their particular location vis-a-vis markets and so on, which is right, but for the purposes of engendering a discussion about getting people to take responsibility for this issue, coming up through some policy dialogues going forward, and getting some resolution through settlements, we thought this process had some things to recommend it. And we pushed that out to what may be its illogical extreme, I don't know, a grand bargain where you could see the efficiency gains and the consumer issues coming in on one side and providing a little bit of surplus benefits that might be invested in some of the other goals that come along with settling all those motivations that I mentioned in the first slide. So a grand bargain model. We also put this across sort of a minimum utility role, a moderate utility role, and a maximum utility role. We know from talking to our advisory council and to many others in the country about this that there are some places where the utility is not thought to be the agent of change and won't be the leader for innovation, and in those cases people want the markets to be expanded to their logical extremes, and in those cases a minimum utility role is probably what those places will come up with. On the other extreme, we tried to think about what a maximum utility role would be. We thought about the Moreland Commission, we thought about Nebraska. This is where the government has said to the utility, you're going to own this from end to end, you're going to take your responsibility, this is going to be you doing this. And in circumstances where there's enough recovery from enough climate damage, that might be a logical outcome. But think about maximum utility role where the states, the federal government get together, tell the utilities, time to take care of business, you're in charge. The moderate role, the middle role, is what we do today to some extent. The utility has some ability to own and move into deregulated subsidiaries and stuff like that, but it doesn't do everything, and it's policed when it does those things that cross over the border between regulated and unregulated sectors. There's a lot of that, I think, that could go forward, and I kind of like the moderate role because it has a positive outcome, potential for a positive outcome across the board. But it's good to think about places that don't see the utility being involved and want to push competition versus those that see, like Nebraska, the utility taking care of business. So we've given you a couple of those. One other thing we posited here is a movement from where we are now directly to an energy services utility. We thought that might be a difficult transition to support intellectually and in reality. So we put together a second option that said, first you want to move through this performance regulation exercise, and then you can move into the energy services utility. So just some of the thinking we've done, a lot more of it's in the paper that we wrote. I want to be quiet. My dad always said, 2 ears, 1 mouth, that should teach you something. So thanks very much for your attention.